Blizzard's on par with Rockstar the way they create shittier versions of already existing vehicles. There are over 65 different cars, bikes and vehicles with wheels in Overwatch 2, and in all fairness, considering that it's a first-person shooter game and has nothing to do with cars, they have designed them all very well. One thing that's really neat right off the bat is that on each of these maps, the cars that are scattered around usually are similar to the cars that you'd find in their respective countries. There are all French cars on the Paris map, and old used American cars in Cuba, just like in real life. With 8 different completely varying car models, Hollywood is the map with the most amount of different vehicles on it. But there's a lot more to them than just that. Cars in real life have a badge that displays its manufacturer. I'm sure, this isn't news to you, right? Whilst the majority of the cars in Overwatch 2 have these brands implied, like on these cars here, there are actually a few brands and manufacturers scattered around here. Let's start with the ones that we know. We have this Japanese brand, Yoku, which is present on the vehicles in Kanazaka and Hanamura. To my knowledge and research, this would be the Honda equivalent in the Overwatch universe. There are actually 2 brands shown on Hollywood, one of which is Ty-Rail, which I can only assume is emulating one of the many caravan brands in real life, and very weirdly enough, Goldshire Pictures. That's right, the movie set of Hollywood. The producer's car that you're escorting as the payload of this map actually shares this logo, meaning that this is likely a one-of-one vehicle or a company brand that is exclusive to the VIP members of this organization. And the last known brand is of course Formula Lux or Lux, which is the race car brand we see on Circuit Royale, but that is it. There are still many unnamed logos we see on many of the fronts of these cars. But what do they mean? Well, their actual names stand unspoken as of right now, but if Blizzard also brands their cars similar to how Rockstar does in Grand Theft Auto, then we can figure out what the real-world comparisons these logos make. This car is very obviously emanating a Bel Air made by Chevrolet, so that would eliminate the long one. This one is based off one of New York's old Checker taxis, so this rather strange emblem will correlate to Checker. This oval-shaped badge, you might say Audi at the beginning, but on closer inspection you'll see that this car is based off of the 1992 Ford Festiva, meaning the oval badge stays the same shape with Ford. This one was probably the most difficult to tell. This car seems like quite a mishmash of a lot of different cars altogether, but I think it resembles an old Renault the closest, specifically the Renault Clio Williams, meaning cut that Renault badge in half and you'll get yourself this new badge. Kinda, not really, but this next one, I couldn't decide if it was different to the last one. The last one has a little groove in its shape, so I thought it was different. But upon research, I found out this car is also based off of a Renault, the Renault 5 Alpine, so I'm going to assume that these 2 logos are actually the same manufacturer, but the badge sits on slightly different areas of the car. And finally, this last one here looks similar to the Yoku brand we saw on the Japanese maps, but this van just screams America in its styling, the bald eagles in the background, definitely not Japanese. And it reminds me very much so of the Dodge Tradesman, so I'm under the assumption the blue pill is Dodge. And as far as the rest of the badgeless, defaced vehicles of Overwatch 2 go, well, I can only tell you what car they're based on, so we're going to be doing exactly that. In order of how much you'd have to pay to buy the car, starting at the bottom and working our way up, we go to Junkertown. No surprise, there is this absolute hunk of shit, which once used to be an old VW transporter, but now there's not much left of that. You could probably buy this or sell this for about 45 bucks. Yes, that's right, bucks for all my American viewers watching. I'm doing this in US dollars, and worth a little more than that just worthless heap of shite shown previously is a wooden bloody wagon, a functional wooden wagon might I add, worth around about $180. Back to this shithole now, for this time a vehicle that just barely works, but at least it goes, I guess, this Plymouth Valiant, or what once used to be that, with some very, minor modifications. I'd argue quite majorly reducing the price down to around about $600 US. A fucking bicycle would be worth more than this. Up next is a fucking bicycle found on Paris, worth at an approximate value of $800. The pickup tricycle found on Havana comes just on top in terms of value. The bicycle looks to be worthless, but with that extra wheel and cargo bay, you'd probably be looking at around about $100 extra. Finally getting to the normal motorized vehicles at last with the Piaggio Typhoon found on Paraiso, and Paraiso only, funnily enough, valued at around about $1,000 to Now, I may know my cars, but I don't know my food tricycles, so this one is just an unnamed food tricycle valued at around about $1,500. We have this rather artsy looking motorbike now, based off of the Model 30 Roma, which you can pick up for around about $2,800. The Jeep Cherokee now from the year 2000, featured on both Hollywood and Nambani. You can get yourself these days for close to $3,500. This was the car I said was loosely based off of the Ford Festiva. I can't find a car that this looks more similar to, so this one comes in at Festiva price at around a flat $4,000. This was one of the cars I had the most issues with when trying to identify. It doesn't really, look like any of the cars I know too much, but maybe you know a little more than me, so if your answer is any different than the Citroen Plurial, then do let me know in the comments down below. The Piaggio 850 is a very special vehicle, and it also holds a very special place in the hearts of the Overwatch universe too, it seems, coming in at $6,000. The pickup truck version of the Yoku cars featured on Hanamura, both of which are based off of the same car but different versions of it. This one is the Honda Active pickup truck version, also valued at 6,000 buckaroos. We've got this motorbike that's featured on many different maps. It's based on the Vespa GTS 300 and goes for around about $7,000. We've got the final Junkertown shitbox, the boss of Junkertown. This is the Jeep Cherokee we saw earlier with a few, just a very few minor adjustments, going with a full Mad Max style, but unlike the Plymouth, I think that these modifications would actually increase the value of this car just a little bit. But I think the very most you'd get for this would be around about $7,000. The van version now of the Yoku vehicle, the Honda Active van, valued at $8,000. This is of course one of the taxis you'd find in central London, the London Black Cab, but more specifically, the LTI TX4 at $9,000. This might be a little bit of a stretch, but come on, you tell me what this could possibly be. I went with the Renault Estafette food van. It's not an exact lookalike, far from it, but this was the closest thing I could find that was actually branded and wasn't some sketchy Chinese mobile food truck made out of fucking tin. We've actually got a payload now, the Subaru 360 Sambar pickup, as close to it as I could possibly find at least, valued at 10,600 buckaroonies. Busan has a car from one of my favorite real-life car manufacturers. It's the Daihatsu Hijet, and you can get a 2019 one for around about $11,500. The Plymouth Valiant that can be seen on Junkertown can also be seen in the far distance of Kanazaka without all of the rust and Mad Maxification, valuing it much higher now at $15,500. It's quite fitting that you find this car here in Dorado, Mexico. The Dodge Tradesman is not really a car you see outside of the Americas, and this one would be worth around about 17Ks. I don't know my bikes as well as I do my cars, so I'm sorry if I'm butchering this, I likely am, but it looks like a Harley Davidson to me, more specifically the Ghost Rider one from 2004, costing just a pretty penny of $18,000. That's expensive for a bike, no? Also valued at $18,000 is this piece of shite. I couldn't tell you exactly what it is. It's a three-wheeler, and it looks, sort of similar to a Fiat 500, the Luigi car. But my best guess is that it's based on a car called the B, made by Daihatsu once again, back in '51. I've covered this before in I think it was a ranking payloads video. This is the Mercury M3 pickup from the 40s, valued at $19,000. This is your traditional American SUV police car, the Ford Explorer Interceptor, valued at a very specific price of $20,100. According to Google. Right next to this, you'll find another very obvious one, the Ford Crown Victoria, specifically the taxi version, worth $22,000. Man, they really just picked the two most obvious cars for the American map. How many of you remember this map, huh? Paris is home to many different vehicles inspired by real French vehicles, just like this one, based heavily off of the Peugeot 404, also priced at 22,000 buckaroonies. I'm a very big lover of cars, if you couldn't tell. And I really don't hate many cars, American, Japanese, whatever, right? But this piece of shit, I despise. It's the Citroen 2CV, and I hate it. Valued at very unreasonably, by the way, at $23,000. But I personally would have to be paid to be seen driving this fucking thing. This is a tricky one, If you couldn't tell at a glance that, There really aren't that many cars you see on the road that look, anything like this. It reminds me of two cars, though. The Mitsubishi i-Me EV, which is valued at $23,000, but also a concept car called the Micro Commuter by Honda. But this one is just a concept car and doesn't have a price, so I'll take the price of the Mitsubishi. Shout out to my Canadians for having the most weirdest, unnecessary taxi coloring. This is the Canadian Toyota Corolla taxi, and what may look weird to us is just a normal taxi in Canada worth $24,000. Hollywood has another Mitsubishi, the Mitsubishi Shogun as it's called for me, but I believe most of the world would call this car the Piero. Well, anyways, it's worth $25,000. Almost done with the police cars now. Busan, rather fittingly, has a Hyundai Sonata police car, which, if you didn't know, is a Korean brand and is worth around about $26,000. And I believe the final police car on this list is the Mitsubishi Shogun police car, or the Piero. It's the same as the normal one before, but with the police decals and lights and stuff, bumping that price up by $3,000. I like this car very much. Well, I mean the one that it's based on, which would be the Renault 5 Alpine, made in France, of course, valued at $28,000. Sticking with French cars and vans too, we have the H-Van made by Citroën. This would be primarily used as a food van for things such as ice cream, hot dogs, gelato, you name it, and you could pick yourself up one of these for 33,000 buckarongos. Also valued at 33,000 buckarongos is the Willys FC150. Willy. Another payload vehicle. I really like when they do that because I can nerd out about cars whilst pushing the car. This one to me, now this is just my opinion of course, looks like a modern adaptation of the Renault Clio Williams. Willy. It's obviously, not a direct match. The front reminds me of that prick from Cars 3, but is priced significantly less than that pompous twat at $35,000. Havana has some of the coolest cars of any map in my opinion, including this pickup made by Ford in the 60s called the F250. You might have heard of it from those adverts,
Ever felt like T-boning your uncle because you found out his wife had been sleeping with your brother? That's what it feels like to drive a Ford F250.
I'm not going to try and pronounce it, but Hollywood is home to another rather pricey family car. This one priced at almost $40,000. I'd say that this is the point where the cars are now considered expensive. The kind of prices of cars that most people won't ever own in their life. At $42,100, we have a Cadillac Series 61 Coupe, also from Havana. I usually hate caravan nerds, but for once in my life, I'd like one to speak up, in case if I get this wrong, which I probably did, but from the extensive research I did over the course of around about 2 minutes, I think this is what's called a Rockwood Ultralight, valued at around about $45,900, but hey, I might just be incorrect. This forklift truck model is used on many different maps of Overwatch, and just in case, I asked a buddy of mine that was forklift certified, and he told me that it was in fact based off of a Caterpillar GP40N1, worth $47,625. Okay, this one I actually researched for quite a while and had no luck. What is with old fire trucks? Do they not have brands or something? I don't know if this is the brand or the place, but it's called the Appleton fire truck, and it was the closest one I could find to it. This car is very obscure. I've never personally seen one in real life, but I would like to. It looks like a very modern version of the Alfa Romeo SZ. As you can see, the car is very boxy, whereas this more sleek-looking version is quite curvaceous and voluptuous, but it's priced, regardless, at $63,000. The very infamous and classic Chevy Bel Air featured on Dorado and Havana. It's my buddy's favorite car ever, but he might not ever have it because he doesn't want to learn how to drive. But even if he did, its average price is about $64,700. What? A more sleeker version of the Citroen DS. I like the way they sort of did a modern rendition on a lot of these classic cars, as if they've been restored from a scrapyard or something. But our universe's version of this car you can buy for around about $70,000. The cars that whiz by have often been described to look like the new Tesla Roadster that's coming out. However, I've always argued that it looks more similar to a Porsche Taycan, and so I'm pricing it that way because it's my video, not yours. It's my video. Fuck you. It's $79,200 now. This car that's kept on display here reminds me very much of the Checker A4 from 1950. It's a very obscure car, but only that manufacturer made the New York taxis at that time, so that's my presumption for it, valued at $95,000. Quite a big jump in price now over to Route 66, where we have what I believe to be based on the Freightliner FLD 132, but maybe I'm wrong. If anyone knows a guy called Graham that's super into trucks that could correct me on this, then do let me know.
This car looks like nothing. Like, this was one of the ones I struggled with most because it really looks like no car that I know of. Its shape is weird and all the features on it are really just different. And it's a little more boxy than this, but some of the features remind me just a little bit of this car called the Dallara Stradale. It's a stretch for sure, but I'm out of other suggestions. It's valued at $236,000. This is a truck that has crashed evidently, but accident aside, I think this looks most like an American construction vehicle called the Bell B50E, valued at $314,000. The map with the most expensive cars now, starting low with the Bentley Mulsanne, valued at $325,000, which is, low to almost nobody. A more modern fire truck now, the E1 fire truck, a truck with, an actual brand this time, but I suppose we're paying for the brand, as they say, because this is worth around about $400,000.
It's London, innit?
This is London's newest red bus, the Metroline New Route Master, which costs around about $446,000. To buy, that is, not to use. A massive jump in price now as we head back to Monaco for the Bugatti Chiron. It's not entirely the same, of course. This one has a bit of a bunda, but it's the car that's most similar to it, valued at 3 million whoppers. Sitting just 2 seats away is the McLaren Sabre, valued just above at $3,790,000. This is a very cool looking bus. It looks nothing of this world. Well, I suppose it looks sort of similar to the Futureliner made by General Motors, which is valued at $4 million. This is also one of those cars that really just doesn't look like anything. Like anything at all! In shape, color, and by the fact that it is very exclusive and owned by a snob, I'm going to say that this is most similar, and it's a stretch again, to the Bugatti Type 57 Atalante, which would be priced at $8,745,000 buccaronis. EcoPoint has this cool snow vehicle, which I believe to be based on the Chetra TM140, made by Russia. This one is obviously for a different purpose, but the Chetra is priced at $10 million. This looks like the car I said the Hollywood Payload looked like, but it is slightly different, and I'd say the more expensive version of the previously named car. This time it's the Bugatti Type 57 SC Atlantic, valued at $11 million. This is a Formula car. I'm assuming it's a new sport like Formula E, because this one is called the Formula Lux or the Formula Lux, and the car looks like a mix between a Formula 1 car, which would be worth between $12 and $16 million, and an Indy car, which will be worth around about $10 million, so I'm going to put that price in between both of these and say $12 million. Now, I said Monaco was home to the most expensive cars on this list, but not the most expensive land vehicles. Take, for example, this monstrosity. There is nothing of this realm that even comes close to this. My closest bet is the Terex Titan, which is worth $7 million, but this gargantuan vehicle has to be at least 3 times bigger, so I'm going to have to put that price at a minimum of $25 million. The motherfucking moon has these lunar roaming vehicles that go round and roam the moon, and each one of these would be worth, that's right, you're reading the amount of zeros correctly, $900 million. That's almost $1 billion. That is crazy, but that's still not the most expensive vehicle. This next one exceeds $1 billion in its entirety, and it might not be what you expect it to be. The 1961 Eagle Blizzy Special was a highly limited production vehicle sold in America originally, and only 3 people have ever owned one of these, that being John F. Kennedy, Vsauce Michael from Vsauce 1, and my neighbor Joe, who passed away last week. Can we get a We Love Joe chain in the comments section, please? I miss him very much. Thank you.